A great many of you commented on my video and the settlement between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, but there are lots of comments and questions thereof as to what the settlement means, what it might mean when an insurance company settles a claim like this, whether there's any admission of guilt or any of these kind of things. So I thought I would address a few of those in another video. So whilst this saga may well be coming to an end, we don't know yet because we haven't really heard from Johnny Depp or his team yet, so we don't know what they're going to do with their portion of the appeal or whether the settlement incorporates his appeal and so on. I thought I would do just a few comments on this settlement and statement by Amber Heard as it currently reads. Now, many of you have picked up the fact that Amber Heard referred to it as, in her words, quote, my truth, her truth. That's exactly what it is, and that's all it can be. It's her version of what happened as she puts out in the statement, because let's be absolutely clear about it, the verdict of the jury and of the court stands. What's happened here is the settlement is in respect of the appeal, so the appeal's been dropped, but the verdict of the court and of the jury, as upheld by that jury, in respect of both parties, there was a small part of it against Johnny Depp, but the most part of it against Amber Heard. That part of the decision stands. Now, the statement put out by Amber Heard includes a bit that says that she doesn't have any restrictions on what she can say. Clearly, that is the lawyers for Johnny Depp and perhaps Johnny Depp himself agreeing, if this is the case, that they don't restrict what she says to the general public. Perhaps because they believe, well, the general public are going to believe whatever they believe regardless, and probably, for the most part, I would think, trust and rely upon that which a jury has adjudicated and come to their verdict on. So, looking at Amber Heard's statement in a little bit more detail, when she says that she has made the very difficult decision to settle the defamation case, what she really means is, or all she can really mean is, that she's come to a decision to accept, to drop the appeal. And whilst it may well be her decision, there's various reasons why someone may decide to settle an appeal, or any case that matter, particularly if it's funded and insured, which is, in my view, probably the most prevalent fact of this entire portion of this saga. So what do I mean by that? Well, any case which is funded by insurance. Now, as an aside, for any of you that are insured with home insurance and you've got the legal insurance tagged on, particularly if it's car insurance and they say, would you like to tag on the legal motoring insurance for £30 or £40 or whatever it might be, without it being legal advice or financial advice, I can tell you from my opinion that would be the best £30 or £40 or whatever they charge that you could ever spend. Because the fees that you could incur in a legal dispute of any nature whatsoever, even sending a letter, if someone wants me as a barrister to send a letter, it's going to be a minimum of 1 hour to discuss it and send out a letter. Probably 2 or if not 3 hours, which is 2 or 3 lots of £300 plus VAT. So your £30 or £40 very easily is very much worth spending. However, when you are insured by whether it be motor insurance, home insurance, and by the way, home insurance can cover you for certain family disputes, neighbour disputes, and all these kind of things. So it's very well worth having the legal insurance bolted onto your house insurance by way of a lawyer's interpretation and recommendation as guidance, you understand, as to what to include in these policies. If you get into these kind of disputes, they will typically fund you up to £100,000 worth of legal fees. But within that, there comes certain caveats, clauses, and restrictions, as you might expect. One of those restrictions is if you unreasonably refuse to accept an offer or to settle the claim as recommended by the insurance company and or the lawyers that you are instructed or giving advice on behalf of the insurance company. If you refuse to accept any of that advice, they might say, we no longer cover you. We are not going to cover you in this claim, pay out the fees, and so on and so forth. Because, as it will stand to reason, hopefully, if you are relying upon an insurance policy to pay out both your fees and expenses and all these kind of things on the basis of your policy, that you need to trust and follow the legal advice that is given to you during the enforcement of that policy, during the insured event, and anything thereafter in relation to that case, which would include appeals. And the same is, very broadly speaking, true universally and worldwide. So an insurance company is going to have buried in the clauses somewhere some terms that say if you do not follow the advice and you do not reasonably agree to settlements and all these kind of things, then we're not going to cover you any further. So that's just one aspect whereby if Amber Heard does have one of these terms buried within the terms and conditions, and she doesn't follow that advice, and she doesn't settle the claim, and she doesn't agree to a settlement as opposed to follow through with the appeal, then she might lose all coverage of the insurance as it is. These are general principles without me having read every word of the insurance policies underpinning this case. There is also another very obvious reason why insurance companies will settle a claim like this, or settle the case in respect of the appeal, as in not pursue the appeal. And that is very often on merits, if something changes or they get a new assessment, a fresh assessment, and so on. So another reason for settling might be that the new lawyers have taken a very deep and dark look at this case and said, we don't think we can win. We've assessed everything, and they might have said, we don't think we can win this appeal. The risk of running the appeal and losing it is far greater than the $1 million, if that is indeed true as it's been reported that they've settled for. The risk of running to the appeal and losing is far greater than settling for $1 million. So they make a commercial decision, and then they make that recommendation to the client, in this case Amber Heard, and say, we recommend, our lawyers, our team recommend that you settle this for $1 million. And if you don't accept that, then potentially, this is what the terms might say, they might say, we are not going to insure you beyond that point. So they might cap the insurance at that point if she doesn't take that advice. So whilst ultimately, technically, it is her case, and technically the decision does rest with her as to whether to settle the case or not, that might be very hard pressed by the insurance company as to whether or not she continues to be covered after that event. Now, there's a third reason for all this, because there is an underlying dispute between the insurance companies as to what they are supposed to be funding and covering her for. Now, you remember from previous videos, which I'm not going to reiterate here, there was an underlying litigation between the insurance companies as to who was to pay for what, and indeed whether they were supposed to pay for it at all. Because of course most insurance policies have clauses that say if someone has done something deliberately wrong or deceitful or anything like that, then they may choose not to pay out. And this may have been another underlying cause which led to the settlement of this case. However, taking another look at the wording itself in her statement, she says, now I finally have an opportunity to emancipate myself from something I attempted to leave 6 years ago. True, she does have that opportunity. But then she goes on to say this is not an act of concession. There are no restrictions or gags and so on going forward. So immediately for me, she's qualifying what she's saying. Whilst on the one hand she says this is not an act of concession, but then immediately qualifies it by saying that there are no restrictions or gags with respect to her voice moving forward. So I can't be entirely confident that it's not an act of concession, that she isn't just giving in. But at the same time, that's what her statement says. So according to her statement, and the official position is that she's not making an act of concession by settling the case, which is of course something that we cannot assume when someone settles a case. People do settle lawsuits for all sorts of reasons. One of the biggest reasons, as I've already mentioned, is a commercial decision to settle the case, because there is always risk in litigation. Many cases settle because the risk of going to trial far outweighs that of the cost of settling the case with no admissions. In fact, there have been many occasions where I've recommended that clients just settle a claim or don't challenge a claim on a no admissions basis, meaning they are making no admissions of any liability to the court, and the court is making no findings of fact against those clients. Because in certain cases where the court makes a finding of fact, that can go against you later on. Because if you come back in a civil case later on and there has already been a finding of fact against you, that can be used against you in the latter case. which obviously means if you settle a case earlier on with no admissions, then that cannot be used against you later on. However, in this case, the settlement is obviously not going to upset the judgment. The settlement is only going to be in respect of the appeal and not fighting that appeal, because a settlement cannot just upturn a jury verdict. The jury verdict is as it stands, and unless overturned or set aside by a court on appeal, the jury verdict is going to stand. There is a hint, however, in what Amber Heard may have been advised in respect of this appeal, also within her statement, where she says, even if my US appeal is successful, the best outcome would be a retrial, where a new jury would have to consider the evidence again. I simply cannot go through that for a third time. Now, as I said in my previous video, it isn't really going through the same thing a third time, because the first of the third that she refers to was the UK trial, and she was not a party, so I don't accept that as being the third time for the same thing. At best, it would be the second time for the same trial, but as I also said in my previous video, it is my view that the court would not have ordered a retrial with a fresh jury. She may well be right in that that's the best outcome she would have hoped for, but I don't believe that would have happened. So it is entirely possible, again in my view, based on the facts and the circumstances, it's my view that her lawyers may have advised her that this is the best outcome, but we are not very hopeful for that outcome. So, in fact, you may lose the appeal and all credibility in the fact that you also lose the appeal, if that's the case that it went on to be. So there is a hint in her statement that she believed that this was the best outcome, when she says, even if the US appeal is successful, the best outcome will be a retrial. Now, like I said, I don't believe there will be a retrial, but that's a hint at what possibly her lawyers have said. So those are just a few of the reasons why cases might settle. In her words, it's not a concession, although some people will understandably believe that it is because she's not fighting the appeal. She does say that she's lost faith in the American legal system, and that could well be one reason that she's not pursuing the appeal. But one might conclude that if that were the case, she wouldn't have appealed the jury verdict in the first place. But as I said, it's complicated by the insurance companies being involved and the underlying litigation as to who is liable for paying for what part of the judgment. But as I say, we haven't heard from Johnny Depp or his team as yet. Hopefully we will do soon, because that might shed further light on what this settlement really was all about and how it came about, and if anything, what might happen next, or whether it really is all over. So thank you for watching. Thank you for your thoughts and comments in relation to the previous video and to this one. Please do remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.